Moving on to week 10, last week I had a record of 8-6 with a total record of 81 correct choices and 52 wrong choices. Let's move on to week 10. We have a pretty rough Thursday night game here. We got the Broncos versus the Raiders. So they just lost their number one receiver in Jacoby Myers, but the good news is that their tight end Brock Bowers seems to be back in full form. Meanwhile, the Broncos defense continues to look pretty good, although they went up against the backup Texans quarterback last week, so it wasn't a crazy feat. The main thing I'm worried about with the Broncos right now is that their offense has been pretty inconsistent. They've had really high highs, such as the fourth quarter of that Giants game, but there's been multiple games now where they've struggled to score. And I do think not having Pat Surtain is going to have more of a big difference this week than it did last week. So this week, I'm actually going to go out on a limb here and say that the Raiders upset the Broncos this week. I don't think this is going to be an overall explanation of what the Broncos will look like for the whole rest of the season, but I think this one will sneak up on them. We got the international game of the week. We got the Colts versus the Falcons. Last week, the Colts definitely underperformed compared to what they have been looking like prior to this season. Daniel Jones looked a lot more like how I expected him to look going into the season rather than how he actually ended up looking like. And I guess the big question is, will they continue to look like that, or was the Steelers defense just that good last week? Meanwhile, the Falcons have been severely underperforming this year. The Falcons have remained one of the most unpredictable teams in the league, from beating the Bills to turning around and losing to the Dolphins, and then just last week they lost to the Patriots. I think ultimately the Colts will be able to rebound here, because I think while the Falcons defense is alright, it's not quite as good as the Steelers defense overall is, which is why I was more surprised that the Steelers defense struggled the prior few weeks before this last game. So I'm going to say the Colts win this one, but the Falcons do have a chance to upset based on which team comes out this week. Next up for week 10, we got Bears versus Giants. The Bears last week won what might have been the game of the season against the Bengals, taking advantage of their pretty poor defense. The only thing I will say is that the Bears defense did look a little weak last week, but they still got the job done, so I guess a win's a win. I've been impressed with how much better the Bears offense looks, which I think kind of goes to show that it was much more of a coaching thing last year than it was a talent thing. Meanwhile, the Giants have just had a rough last few weeks. They're on a bit of a losing streak now. They lost Cam Scatabo a few weeks ago, and I think that we're getting to the point where I wouldn't be surprised to see some firings by the end of this season once again. There was a little bit of hope there for a few weeks where the head coach, he was looking really excited about the way things have gone, thinking, hey, my job might have been saved, but I'm just going to be honest, I think that after this season, his time's probably over. Their defense has been kind of frustrating, and it definitely shows in the locker room. They have a lot of potential, but they just can't seem to get it done. So with the Giants dipping enthusiasm, it's definitely seeming like they need to have a big win here. And I think, believe it or not, the Giants defense will be able to pull it together and get the job done this week, miraculously. Next up, we got Jaguars versus Texans. I think there's a good chance this week that CJ Stroud's out. I'm not entirely sure just yet. I'm recording this Wednesday afternoon, and I haven't really heard anything about it yet. The good news is that if the backup does have to play, the defense they're playing this week is not quite as good as the one they were playing last week, so I think they'll be able to get a little more done this time. Meanwhile, the Jaguars struggled a bit against the Raiders this past week, but they ultimately got it done when the Raiders went for a 2-point conversion in overtime and failed. The Jaguars have definitely been dipping down the past few weeks, and I don't know if that's going to continue, but if it does, then I think that the Texans actually will be able to get it done this week. Next up for week 10, we got Panthers versus Saints. Now, I am not saying this because I'm a Panthers fan, and I'm actually not this time. I think the Panthers are going to win. Now, for one, the Panthers have had quite a few wins. It feels like they either get completely blown out or they win a close game, other than that Falcons game. And I don't think the Saints are quite on the level to where they're going to be blowing out any team this season, considering their record and their just quarterback throw-ins. They're playing Tyler Show still. This is, I think, his second week starting ever. Panthers defense definitely showed up last week against what was previously the number one passing offense in the Packers. But the team has had a tendency where when the running offense doesn't work, they start panicking, throwing these weird passes, and then that's where things really collapse. I'm more talking about the fact that the Saints offense is not very good, and I think ultimately that's what's going to tip in the Panthers' direction. Next up, we got Dolphins versus Bills. The Dolphins had a really good week against the Falcons 2 weeks ago, and then looked about back to what they were looking like before against the Ravens. They just fired their general manager, which is not really much of a surprise. The main thing is that they're staying with the head coach, which I don't think is a bad idea because realistically, I don't think there's really much of a replacement for the rest of the season. May as well just ride it out, see how things go. But at this point, I don't really see much hope for the rest of their season. I imagine they're starting to go into a tank mode a little bit. They've already lost too much, and they're continuing to just not look great. And to make matters worse, they're going up against the Bills, who are red hot right now. They absolutely killed the Panthers a few weeks ago, which was partly because of Andy Dalton and partly because they just had a really good game. And then they were able to beat the Chiefs, who had a lot of momentum going into that last game. So that is definitely a good sign for the Bills. And I think this game is going to go about how people are expecting it to go. Dolphins aren't good, Bills are good. The Bills are going to win. That's really all I have to say. I'm not going to overthink this one. Next up, we got Ravens versus Vikings. The Ravens seem to be back to where they should have been from the get-go, with their defense looking pretty good, although it was against the Dolphins last week, and their offense finally looking good again because Lamar Jackson is back. The Vikings this past week had an impressive game on J.J. McCarthy's reunion to the team, where they ended up beating the Lions, who was a bit of a surprise to me and a bit of a surprise to a lot of people considering how bad J.J. McCarthy left off when he last played. And I think the moral of this for me for the Vikings is I'm not going to fall for it. I'm just being realistic here, and I'm not going to hold out hope that J.J. McCarthy's continuing to look as good as he did. Depending on how the Ravens defense plays, I think they're going to be able to shut the Vikings down a lot more than the Lions did. And I think the Ravens will be able to continue their comeback streak, getting another win in a row right here against the Vikings. Next up, we got Jets versus Browns. This one's got to be the game of the week. We got the one-win Jets, and then we got the Browns, who have just been all over the place this year. To be fair, the Browns defense is still pretty good, but the Browns offense and the Jets offense both are pretty bad. The Jets defense was good, but they just traded away two of their best players on defense, and I don't really know where they stand at this point. So I'm leaning more towards the Browns getting it done here, just because I think that the Browns defense will be able to shut down the Jets offense a little bit more. I don't think the Jets offense is going to be able to perform quite as well when they're not playing the Bengals, because it just seems like the Bengals are just the team if you just want to kind of have a fun game for the other team on offense. And yeah, I think the Browns will be able to add another win to their column to ruin their draft position just a little bit more. Next up, we got Buccaneers versus Patriots. Buccaneers coming back from bye week, and they were still pretty injured at the moment. Bucky Irving, I don't know if he's going to be back quite yet. Baker was playing through an injury clearly because he just didn't look quite like himself the past few games. Their defense is a little bit inconsistent. They've suffered a few injuries. They look good against the Saints, but I don't know how hard it is to look good against the Saints. The main thing I'm worried about is that the Patriots offense might be able to score in the Buccaneers defense quite a bit. But I think as long as the Buccaneers are healthy enough, especially Baker, they're going to be able to score enough and then just eventually outscore the Patriots, because I think the Buccaneers defense is solid and they're going to be able to at least get one or two stops, because every once in a while, every few games, the Patriots have looked pretty turnover prone. And I think those turnovers are what's going to change this game and give the Buccaneers the win. Next up, we got Cardinals versus Seahawks. I'd say at this point of the season, the Seahawks are a top 3 team in the NFL right now. Their defense has been great and their offense has also been great on top of that. I think the Cardinals are starting to regain some ground a little bit. Jacoby Brissett is officially starting at quarterback from now on, and based on how things have been going, that might be the right move. The Cardinals' defense is still a little bit of a mystery, but it held up pretty well against the Cowboys, who previously had one of the best offenses in the league. But the Seahawks are in such a run right now that it's kind of hard to bet against them at this point. I do still just feel, knowing Sam Darnold, that he's going to have some late year fall off, and they're going to probably make the playoffs at this point, but I don't know how far they're actually going to get. It really depends on if Sam Darnold's actually able to lock in for the playoffs. But for this game at least, I'm sticking with the Seahawks to win. Next up, we got Rams versus 49ers for Week 10. This is their second matchup, with the 49ers winning the first one. And since the last matchup, the 49ers have only gotten more injured. Meanwhile, the Rams are more or less the same team as they were before, but they really blew the last time they played against the 49ers, and I don't see them making the same mistakes that they made last time. And the problem with the 49ers, and all the 49ers fans probably agree with me, they have been a really well-rounded team despite all the injuries, and I think they've done a good job of putting together all the pieces. But it's hard to really put them as a top contender just because of how many injuries that they've had and how many players that they've lost. And I'm talking mostly defense at this point. They've gotten a couple of their offensive guys back. George Kittle's back. Ricky Pearsall, I think, is supposed to be back soon, but who knows. But yeah, all their defensive injuries are definitely going to kill them here. And the Rams are going to learn from the mistakes from their last matchup and get the win here. Next up, we got Lions versus Commanders. The Lions last week ended up losing to the J.J. McCarthy Vikings in a pretty embarrassing fashion. Luckily, they're a little bit less embarrassing at this point than the Commanders, who have had a really tough season. Unfortunately, Jaden Daniels is going to be out for this game and many more games moving forward. Terry McLaurin's not going to be there either, which is just another add-on. Luke McCaffrey's out for this season. Marshawn Lattimore is out for this season. They had a tough week last week. So yeah, the Commanders team is falling apart. They already weren't very good before these added injuries, and now they're just going to be worse. The Lions are looking to rebound from the loss last week. I believe they're going to be able to get it done here. The Commanders' defense is just so weak at this point, and I think that with Jaden Daniels not being around on the offense, it's only going to be worse. So Lions get the win here. For the Sunday night game, we got the Chargers versus the Steelers. The Steelers had a very impressive win against the Colts where their defense did a lot of the heavy lifting, but the offense was no slouches either. They generated 4 turnovers off of the Colts with 2 interceptions and 2 fumbles off of Daniel Jones. And if they're able to keep that up, they might be able to avoid the dreaded 9-8 season. The Chargers, however, have gotten themselves in a tougher spot. And I'm saying this solely because Joe Alt is now out for the season. And there is a big difference between how successful the Chargers offense was with Joe Alt and without Joe Alt. And without Joe Alt, they are going to struggle. They already lost the other tackle to even start the season, so that's just another add-on to all of this. There's still a lot of offensive weapons. The receivers are all pretty good. They have a pretty good tight end situation going on, but it's looking rough. If the Steelers defense continues what they were able to start last week, I think they're going to be able to get it done here, especially with the Chargers having the injuries that they've had. And finally, for the Monday night game for Week 10, we got the Eagles versus the Packers. The Eagles have been rising back up once again after having an on and off first few weeks. And a team looking to avenge themselves from this past week are the Packers, who just lost to the Panthers. This is their second loss of the year, but both of their 2 losses have been embarrassing. I do think their offense will rebound and will be better next week against the Eagles, despite I think the Eagles having a better defense than the Panthers. But what's really going to tip the scale here for me is the Eagles' offense is going to overpower the Packers' defense, in my opinion. I don't think that the Packers' defense is quite as strong as they initially were to start the season, especially against the run. If Saquon Barkley is able to get going, this should be an easy win, and I'm going to stick with the Eagles for this one. And that's going to be it for this week. This season's really been flashing by. If you disagree with any of my opinions, then comment below complaining about it. Come back if I'm wrong and laugh in my face about it. Don't come back if I'm right. And yeah, that's going to be it. See ya.